There are moments in life when you realize the person standing closest to you is a stranger. Marcus Hartley stood frozen at his daughter's bedroom door that night, watching a scene that would shatter everything he thought he knew. Lily was crying in the arms of their housekeeper, Rachel, a young black woman who had worked in their mansion for 6 months. But it wasn't the crying that stopped his heart. It was the way Rachel whispered, so soft he almost missed it, "I'm here, baby girl. Just like I promised your mama I would be." The hallway felt colder than it should have been, even with the heat running. Marcus's hand trembled on the doorframe. He didn't know that Rachel had been there in the hospital room 3 years ago, holding his wife's hand when he couldn't. He didn't know Sarah's last words weren't for him. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from what you see. It comes from what you've been too afraid to remember. The Hartley mansion sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn in Westchester County, the kind of place that showed up in architectural magazines with captions about modern luxury and timeless elegance. Marcus had bought it 7 years ago, back when Sarah was still alive and Lily was just a baby who couldn't sleep through the night. Sarah had loved the house immediately, especially the big windows in the kitchen that let morning light pour across the marble countertops. She'd stand there with her coffee, watching the sun climb over the trees, and Marcus would wrap his arms around her waist and think he had everything a man could want. Now the house felt like a museum, beautiful, expensive, and completely empty of life. Marcus walked through it every morning like a ghost, moving through his own memory, touching nothing, feeling nothing, just going through the motions of a routine that kept him from thinking too hard about what he'd lost. He left for the office at 6:30, came home after 10, and the hours in between were filled with meetings and phone calls and emails that made him feel like he was doing something important, even though he couldn't remember why any of it mattered anymore. Lily was 7 now, with Sarah's dark hair and her habit of biting her lower lip when she was concentrating on something. Marcus saw his wife in every expression that crossed his daughter's face, and it hurt so much that he'd learned to look away. He told himself it was easier this way, better for both of them if he kept his distance, kept working, kept moving forward, without looking back at the wreckage of that night 3 years ago when a drunk driver ran a red light and changed everything. Rachel Washington had started working for them 6 months ago. She'd answered an ad Marcus's assistant had posted, showed up for the interview in a neat blue dress, with her references printed on resume paper that still smelled like the copy shop. She was 28 years old, had kind eyes and a gentle voice, and she'd looked around the vast, silent house with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. When he'd asked why she wanted the job, she'd said simply, "I'm good with children, and I think your daughter needs someone who can be here when you can't." He'd hired her on the spot, grateful to have one less thing to worry about. What he hadn't noticed, because he was never home long enough to notice anything, was how quickly Lily had attached herself to Rachel, how the little girl who barely spoke anymore had started laughing again, how she'd begun drawing pictures at the kitchen table while Rachel made dinner, chattering about her day at school, asking questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether birds dreamed when they slept. Rachel answered every question with patience and warmth, and slowly, carefully, she'd become the center of Lily's small world. Marcus didn't see any of this. He was too busy running away from his own grief to notice that his daughter was drowning in hers. The night everything changed started like any other. Marcus had been in the city for a board meeting that ran long, the kind of endless discussion about quarterly projections and market positioning that used to energize him, but now just felt like noise. He'd checked his watch around 7:30, saw that he'd missed Lily's bedtime again, and felt the familiar twist of guilt that he'd learned to ignore. But then his phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. The meeting was cancelled. Budget concerns. They'd reschedule for next week. For the first time in months, Marcus found himself leaving the office before 9 o'clock. The drive back to Westchester took 40 minutes in light traffic, and he spent most of it staring at the road ahead, not thinking about much of anything. When he pulled into the circular driveway, the house was lit up like usual, every window glowing warm against the dark. He parked in the garage, came in through the kitchen, and noticed immediately that something was different. There was music playing softly from upstairs. A woman's voice, singing something low and gentle that he didn't recognize. Marcus climbed the stairs slowly, loosening his tie, his briefcase still in his hand. The singing was coming from Lily's room. The door was cracked open, just enough for a slice of lamplight to fall across the hallway carpet. He moved closer, meaning to push the door open and say hello, but something made him stop. Some instinct that told him to wait, to watch, to listen. Through the gap in the door, he could see his daughter sitting on the edge of her bed in her pink pajamas, her face buried against Rachel's shoulder. Rachel was holding her, one hand stroking Lily's hair in slow, soothing circles. The little girl was crying, her whole body shaking with sobs that sounded like they'd been held in for a very long time. And Rachel was whispering to her, soft words that Marcus had to strain to hear. "I know, baby girl. I know it hurts. It's okay to miss her. It's okay to be sad." Lily's voice came out muffled and broken. "Why did she leave me? Why did Mummy have to go away?" "Oh, sweetheart." Rachel's voice cracked, and Marcus saw her wipe at her own eyes. "Your mama didn't want to leave. She loved you more than anything in this whole world. She fought so hard to stay. I can't remember her face anymore. I try, but I can't see it. That's okay. That's normal. But I can tell you about her if you want. I can tell you what she was like." Marcus felt something cold slide down his spine. His hand tightened on the doorframe. When he spoke, his voice came out rough and strange, barely his own. "How would you know what she was like?" Both of them jumped. Rachel's head snapped toward the door, her eyes going wide. Lily pulled back from her embrace, tears still streaming down her face, looking at her father like she'd been caught doing something wrong. For a long moment, nobody moved. The music kept playing, some old jazz standard about lost love and second chances. Marcus pushed the door open all the way and stepped into the room, his heart hammering against his ribs. Rachel stood up slowly, her hands smoothing down the front of her shirt like she needed something to do with them. "Mr. Hartley, I didn't know you were home. Answer the question." His voice was harder now, edged with something that might have been anger or might have been fear. "How would you know what my wife was like?" Rachel's throat worked as she swallowed. She glanced down at Lily, then back at Marcus, and he saw her make some kind of decision. "We should talk. Downstairs. Let me get Lily settled first." "No." Marcus took another step into the room. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it now." "Daddy, don't be mad at Rachel." Lily's voice was small and scared. "She's just trying to help." "It's okay, sweet girl." Rachel knelt down beside the bed, eye level with the little girl. "Why don't you lie down and try to sleep? Your daddy and I need to have a grown-up conversation, but everything's going to be fine. I promise." Lily looked uncertain, her gaze flickering between the two adults, like she was trying to figure out what was happening. But Rachel's voice was so calm, so steady, that eventually the little girl nodded and crawled under her covers. Rachel tucked the blanket around her shoulders, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and then straightened up and walked past Marcus into the hallway. He followed her, pulling the door closed behind him, his mind racing with questions he didn't know how to ask. They stood facing each other in the dim hallway, and Marcus realized he'd never really looked at Rachel before. Not properly. Now, he saw the shape of her face, the particular shade of brown in her eyes, the way she held herself like someone who'd learned to be careful about taking up space. She looked exhausted, like she'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time. "My name isn't Rachel Washington," she said quietly. "It's Rachel Porter. I was a nurse at Mercy General 3 years ago. I was on shift the night they brought your wife in after the accident." The world tilted. Marcus heard a ringing in his ears, felt his vision narrow to a tunnel with Rachel at the end of it. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. She kept talking, her words coming faster now, like she needed to get them all out before she lost her nerve. "Sarah was in the ICU for 3 days. You were there the first night, but after that, you mostly stayed in the waiting room. I don't think you could stand to see her like that. Hooked up to all those machines, not responding." Rachel's voice was gentle, but there was something underneath it that might have been reproach. "She woke up once. Just for a few minutes. On the 3rd day. You weren't there. It was just me." Marcus felt his knees go weak. He reached out, braced himself against the wall. "What did she say?" "She asked about Lily first, wanted to know if her baby girl was okay. I told her yes, your daughter only had minor injuries, she was going to be fine." And Sarah smiled. She actually smiled, even though I could see how much pain she was in. Rachel's eyes were shining with tears now. Then she asked me to promise her something. She said, "Please watch over my daughter. Tell her I love her. Tell her every day. Don't let her forget." "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would she ask you? A stranger?" "Because I was there. Because you weren't." Rachel said it without cruelty, just stating a fact. She was dying, Mr. Hartley, she knew it. And she was terrified that Lily would grow up thinking her mother abandoned her. She made me promise, and I did. Then she closed her eyes, and 10 minutes later, she was gone. Marcus slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. He could hear himself breathing, harsh and ragged, like he'd been running. "I couldn't do it. I couldn't watch her die. I was a coward." "You were in shock. You were grieving, but so was your daughter, and she needed you." Rachel crouched down in front of him, her voice firm now. "I tried to find you afterward. I wanted to tell you what Sarah said, but the hospital wouldn't give me your contact information, and by the time I figured out how to reach you, I'd been let go. Budget cuts. I lost my job, my apartment, everything. It took me 2 years to get back on my feet. So you came here. You lied about who you were. I kept my promise." Rachel's jaw set stubbornly. "When I saw your ad, I knew it was a sign. Sarah asked me to watch over Lily, and that's what I've been doing. Your daughter needed someone who would actually see her, who would talk to her about her mother, who would let her grieve instead of pretending everything was fine. I didn't tell you who I was, because I knew you'd send me away. You'd be too ashamed to face the truth." "The truth?" Marcus laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. "What truth is that? That you've been so busy running from your own pain that you left your daughter to drown in hers, that you've been using work as an excuse to avoid being a father, that you're scared if you love her too much, losing her will hurt as bad as losing Sarah did." Rachel stood up, looking down at him with something that might have been pity. "But you know what the worst part is? Lily thinks it's her fault. She thinks you don't want to be around her because she reminds you of what you lost. She thinks she's the reason you're never home." Each word was a knife, cutting through the defenses Marcus had built around himself. He thought about all the nights he'd worked late, all the bedtimes he'd missed, all the times Lily had asked him to read her a story or help with her homework, and he'd said he was too tired, too busy. Tomorrow for sure. He'd told himself he was protecting her, protecting himself. But all he'd done was abandon her the same way Sarah had, except he'd chosen to do it. He'd walked away on purpose. "I don't know how to fix this." His voice came out raw. "I don't know how to be what she needs." You start by showing up. You stop running. You sit with the pain instead of hiding from it. Rachel held out her hand. And you let people help you. You don't have to do this alone. Marcus looked at her outstretched hand for a long moment. Then he took it, let her pull him to his feet. They stood there in the hallway of his beautiful, empty house, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest, not breaking, opening, like a door that had been locked too long finally swinging wide. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all of it. For not being there when Sarah needed me, for not being there for Lily, for making you carry this by yourself. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to your daughter." Rachel gestured toward the closed bedroom door. "She's the one who's been waiting for you." Marcus walked back to Lily's room, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his ribs. He pushed the door open. Lily was still awake, lying on her side with her eyes open, staring at nothing. When she saw him, she sat up quickly, and he could see her bracing herself for him to leave again, to say good-night from the doorway and disappear like he always did. Instead, Marcus crossed the room and sat down on the edge of her bed. Up close, he could see how much she'd grown. When had that happened? When had his baby girl's face started losing its roundness, her features sharpening into the person she was becoming? She looked so much like Sarah it hurt to breathe, but for the first time, Marcus didn't look away. "I'm sorry, Lilybug." The old nickname came out without thinking, something he hadn't called her since Sarah died. "I'm so sorry I haven't been here." Lily's lower lip trembled. "It's okay, Daddy. I know you're busy." "No, it's not okay. None of this is okay." Marcus reached out, hesitant, and Lily threw herself into his arms, so fast it nearly knocked him backward. She was crying again, but these tears were different. Release instead of desperation. He held her tight, one hand cradling the back of her head, and let himself cry too. All the grief he'd been holding back for 3 years came pouring out, and he didn't try to stop it. He just held his daughter and let her hold him back, and they cried together for the woman they'd both loved and lost. "I miss Mummy so much," Lily sobbed against his shoulder. "And I miss you too. You're here, but you're not really here. It's like I lost both of you." I know, baby, and I'm so sorry, but I'm here now. Really here. And I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Marcus pulled back just enough to look at her tear-stained face. "I'm going to do better. I'm going to be the dad you deserve, the dad Mom would want me to be." "You promise? Really, truly promise?" "Really, truly promise." Lily studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she nodded and hugged him again, burying her face in his shirt. Marcus looked up and saw Rachel standing in the doorway, watching them. There were tears on her face too, but she was smiling. A real smile, warm and genuine and relieved. "Thank you," Marcus mouthed over his daughter's head. Rachel nodded once, then quietly pulled the door closed, giving them privacy. Marcus stayed right where he was, holding Lily until her breathing evened out and she fell asleep against his chest. Only then did he carefully lay her down, tucked the blanket around her shoulders the way Rachel had done, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Then he sat there in the dim lamplight, watching his daughter sleep, and made a silent promise to Sarah, to Rachel, to himself. He was done running. Starting tomorrow, he was going to learn how to be present, how to live with the pain instead of hiding from it, how to be a father. The next morning, Marcus called his assistant and cleared his schedule for the week. Then he called his therapist, the one he'd seen twice after Sarah died, and then stopped going to because it was too hard to talk about. He made an appointment for that afternoon. After that, he went downstairs and found Rachel in the kitchen, making pancakes while Lily sat at the table drawing with colored pencils. "Good morning, Daddy." Lily's whole face lit up when she saw him. "You're home. Rachel's making the special pancakes with chocolate chips." "I can see that." Marcus met Rachel's eyes across the room. She looked uncertain, like she wasn't sure what to expect from him. "Rachel, can we talk? After breakfast?" She nodded, turning back to the stove. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat down next to his daughter, something he hadn't done in months. Lily immediately scooted closer, showing him her drawing. It was a picture of 3 people holding hands, standing in front of a house. "This is you, and me and Rachel," she explained. "We're a team." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, Bug, we are." They ate breakfast together, all 3 of them, and it was awkward at first. Marcus didn't know what to say, how to make small talk with his own daughter. But Lily filled the silence easily, chattering about school and her friends and a book she was reading. Rachel listened and asked questions, and gradually Marcus found himself joining in, and by the time they finished eating, something in the house felt different. Lighter. Like windows had been opened after a long winter. After Lily went upstairs to brush her teeth, Marcus helped Rachel clear the dishes. They worked in silence for a while, and then Marcus said, "I want you to stay, not as the housekeeper. As part of our family, if you're willing. Lily needs you. I need you. To help me figure out how to do this right." Rachel set down the plate she was holding and turned to face him. "Mr. Hartley?" "Marcus, please." "Marcus," she took a breath. "I'll stay, but not as hired help. Sarah was my friend, even if we only knew each other for a few days. And Lily is," her voice wavered, "Lily is the closest thing I have to family. I lost my mother 2 years ago. I don't have siblings. When I made that promise to Sarah, I didn't just do it out of duty. I did it because I wanted to, because that little girl deserves to know how much her mother loved her, how much both her parents love her. Then stay, as family. That's what Sarah would have wanted." Rachel wiped at her eyes, nodding. "Okay, yes, I'll stay." The weeks that followed were not easy. Marcus had spent so long avoiding his grief that when he finally let himself feel it, the weight was almost unbearable. He cried during therapy sessions, talking about Sarah for the first time since the funeral. He cried in his car on the way home from the office. He cried in the shower, in his bed at night, in his closet, when he finally opened the box of Sarah's things he'd been unable to look at. But Lily was there, and Rachel was there, and slowly, painfully, Marcus learned that feeling the pain was better than running from it, because on the other side of that pain was connection, love, life. He started coming home at 6 o'clock instead of 10, started having dinner with Lily every night, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories. He learned about her favorite color, purple, her best friend at school, a girl named Jessica, the fact that she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. He learned how to braid her hair, though his first attempts were terrible and made both of them laugh until they cried. He learned how to be present, how to show up, how to be a father, even when it hurt. Rachel stayed, not in the guest house where the previous housekeeper had lived, but in one of the main bedrooms, because she was family now. She told Lily stories about Sarah, shared memories that helped keep Sarah's presence alive in the house. She taught Marcus how to make his daughter's favorite foods, how to talk to her about emotions, how to hold space for grief without trying to fix it, and in doing so, she kept her promise. She watched over Lily, told her every day that her mother loved her, made sure the little girl never forgot. 6 months later, on what would have been Sarah's 35th birthday, the 3 of them drove to the cemetery. Marcus hadn't been back since the funeral. He'd been too afraid. But Lily had asked, and Rachel had squeezed his hand, and together they'd walked across the grass to Sarah's grave. Lily placed flowers on the headstone, pink roses that had been Sarah's favorite. Then she looked up at her father and said, "Daddy, I think Mummy would be proud of you now." Marcus knelt down, eye level with his daughter. "You think so?" "Yeah, because you're not sad all the time anymore. I mean, you're still sad sometimes. We all are. But you're here. You're really here." She threw her arms around his neck, "And that's what Mummy would have wanted, for us to be together, to be happy again, even though she's gone." Marcus looked over Lily's shoulder at Rachel, who was standing a few feet away with tears streaming down her face. She gave him a small nod, and he understood. Sarah had known. Even in those final moments, even when she was dying, she'd known exactly what her daughter would need. Not a perfect father, not someone who never cried or never hurt, just someone who showed up, someone who stayed, someone who loved enough to keep trying, even when it was hard. "You're right, Bug," Marcus whispered. "I think Mum would be proud, of both of us." They stayed at the cemetery for a while, the three of them. Marcus told Sarah about the changes he'd made, about therapy and coming home early and learning how to braid hair. Lily talked about school and her drawings and how Rachel had taught her to make spaghetti just like Mummy used to. Rachel stood quietly, one hand on Lily's shoulder, the other on Marcus's, connecting them all. Living and dead, past and present, pain and healing. When they finally left, walking back across the grass toward the car, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the ability to carry it without being crushed. To remember Sarah with love instead of only sorrow. To be grateful for the time they'd had instead of bitter about what had been taken away. That night, after Lily was asleep, Marcus and Rachel sat in the kitchen drinking tea. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Comfortable, full. Rachel had been looking at medical schools again, thinking about finishing her nursing degree. Marcus had promised to help her, to pay for whatever she needed, but she'd insisted on taking out loans. She wanted to do it herself, she said, but she'd do it slowly, part-time, so she could still be there for Lily. "Thank you," Marcus said into the peaceful silence, "for everything, for keeping your promise, for not giving up on us." Rachel smiled, cupping her mug in both hands. "I didn't do it alone. You did the hard part. You chose to change. You chose to show up. Sarah knew you would, eventually. She just needed to make sure Lily had someone to hold on to while you found your way back. I wish I could thank her. Tell her I'm sorry it took so long. I think she knows." Rachel's voice was soft. "I think she's been watching, and I think she's glad we found each other. All three of us. We're a family now. The kind you choose, the kind you build, and that's exactly what she wanted." Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of it settle into his bones. They were a family, broken and rebuilt, scarred but healing, learning how to live with loss while still making room for joy. It wasn't the family he'd imagined when he bought this house 7 years ago. It wasn't the life Sarah had dreamed of. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was enough. Outside, the stars were coming out one by one, pinpricks of light in the dark. Marcus thought about promises and second chances, about the strangers who become family, about love that survives even death, carried forward by the people who remember. And he thought about the night he'd stood frozen in that hallway, watching his daughter cry in the arms of a woman he'd thought was a stranger, hearing words that would change everything. Sometimes the truth doesn't come from what you see. It comes from what you've been too afraid to remember. But when you finally find the courage to face it, when you let yourself feel all the pain you've been running from, that's when the healing can begin. That's when you discover you're not as alone as you thought. That's when you learn the people who save us aren't always the ones we expect. Sometimes they're the ones who show up quietly, keep their promises, and love us until we remember how to love ourselves. Marcus finished his tea and rinsed the cup in the sink. Upstairs, Lily was dreaming. Tomorrow he'd wake up early and make her breakfast. Tomorrow they'd build blanket forts or go to the park or just spend time together, being present, being family. Tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Not because he had to, because he wanted to, because he'd finally learned what Sarah had known all along. Showing up is the hardest part, but it's also the most important, and when you do, when you really do, everything else falls into place.